Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today we are taking a look at what was considered for a very long time, and probably still is considered by those that got stuck grinding through the old version of it, considered to be one of the worst battleships, if not the worst battleship in-game, and that is the Tier 9 Japanese tech line battleship, the Izumo. Now, I myself suffered through every single hull module in this ship. When I got to the Izumo, this is my second battleship line that I grind, a second or third, I can't remember exactly. I think it was the American battleships that I did, either the Germans or the Japanese. It was one after the other, so it was, one of the first three lines that I had grinded up when I started playing the game, before I even started doing YouTube. And I made the very unwise decision to spend my free XP going from the Amagi to the Izumo. So I used my free XP to complete that Amagi grind, which was incredibly stupid. You should never do that. Save free XP to get through the upgrade modules, which I didn't do. So I got stuck grinding through the A, B, and C hulls of the Izumo. And this is before the buffs that we're about to talk about. So trust me, I suffered for quite some time trying to get through the Izumo. The ship back then, she had a massive detection radius. Her base detection was like 19 kilometers before you slapped any modules on there. As you can tell, she has this massive open deck that was 32 millimeters. It's 32 millimeters from the lower deck to the upper deck to the stern, so everybody could pin it. And then, too, the main battery guns were horridly inaccurate. She had 1.8 Sigma with Japanese dispersion with only 9 guns. The Japanese dispersion is terrible. It still is terrible today, but it's made up for by the fact that most Japanese battleships have either one or two things going for them. They either have very large guns for their tier, meaning that, yes, your dispersion isn't that great, but you have a very large shell that can probably overmatch the bow and stern armor of the other same tier battleships at your tier. Like the Yami, of course, is probably the best example of this. She has 18.1 inch guns, but with the Japanese dispersion, but you only really need a shell or two to connect, and you're doing a lot of damage in the Yami. Or you have something, of course, like some of the lower tier ones that have, like, 10 or 12 guns at their tier, like the Amagi, which, yes, she has 16-inch guns with not the best dispersion, but she has a good number of them at her tier. The Izumo has an average number of guns, 9 guns, of an average caliber, 16-inch, at tier 9. But she had terrible dispersion and not the best Sigma ever. So the guns were horridly inaccurate. And trying to get through that ship that's being pinned by HE, getting set on fire constantly, you can't hit jack in it, was incredibly frustrating. Now keep in mind, this is, again, like literally the third line that I grinded up when I started playing the game, so I didn't exactly know what was going on at the time. So it was terrible. And that's why this ship was considered to be so bad. I haven't even touched upon the gun layout either. Because, of course, you got all the guns forward to the superstructure, which, there's definitely some strong sides to that. But the third turret's in such an awkward position that, if you look at it, the turret is facing backwards. So the barrels are facing towards superstructure. On most other ships that have this layout, the guns are facing forward, which means that, you can easily sweep from one side to the other side. If a target's on the left side of your ship, you can, just have all 9 guns facing on that side. If we're facing on the right-hand side, it's not that long to rotate. But with the Izumo, that third turret's got to take the long way around because it's facing the wrong way. So, it takes forever to get your, 7, 8, and 9 guns on target. So all you have is your 1 through 6 guns on target with the terrible dispersion. So yeah, it sucked. It sucked for a very long time. Then Wargaming finally saw the light around patch, I think it was 7.6, 7.7. They finally started to realize, hey, this ship is not that great. And keep in mind, this was a full, 5 patch cycles since the ship was introduced. The Izumo came out in 3.0, 3.1. So, this is literally years after the ship had been out. They finally started to buff it. They started by increasing the thickness of that upper deck. That upper deck is now 57 millimeters thick, which is a giant middle finger to most HE shells in the game. So that giant slab of deck where the superstructure is at that you see is 57 millimeters now. So, yeah, good luck getting through that. There are some ships that can, but you're not getting pinned by every single cruiser in DD at the tier now, because so many players try to make sure they can overmatch that 32, or they can pin that 32 millimeters of armor with their HE, of course, by taking IFHE. So that got buffed, and then the detectability got buffed too. Her 19.2 detectability got decreased to 17.9 now. So that helps a ton. Yes, it's only 2 kilometers, but once you start adding in, obviously, the concealment commander seal in the module, that starts to, of course, add up, and you have a decent detectability now. And then, a little while later, she got some of her best buffs. So, the penetration of the AP of her 16-inch shells was increased, and then her Sigma, the biggest buff, got increased from 1.8 to 2.0. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but trust me, for a battleship, that's a big deal. A 0.2 Sigma increase, on top of giving her AP shells better pins, that, oh yeah. So now that means you're hitting stuff more often, and the AP shells are pinning better, especially when it comes to battleships. In the match you're watching in the background, you'll see how good the penetration is on these AP shells now, because I really get to give you guys a good display of how easy the ship is, well, how easy the ship can citadel other ships now, too. So, well, other battleships, I should say. So, that's what happened with the Izumo. How is she in today's World of Warships, though? Well, she has a couple of things going for her still. Of course, this is one of the older battleships. She's been around since, again, patch 3.0, 3.1, I think. So, she's been around quite a bit. Now, the Japanese battleships have always been more of the hang in the back and snipe type of battleships. The same, very much true here with the Izumo. And some of her design features have very much aged very well. One of the biggest ones is look at her superstructure, or I should say lack thereof. Just look at the ship. Like, it doesn't have superstructure. You've got one pagoda. You've got a little bit of a bump there with the little bit of lower superstructure, and you get a funnel and the rear conning tower, and that's it. There's no superstructure on this ship in comparison to other tier 9 and 10 battleships. So there's not a lot there for HE spammers to farm. And keep in mind too, that entire upper deck is 57. So they can't pin that. So at range, when all those HE shells are falling on you from, like, whatever, insert rapid firing HE cruiser here, that's not getting pinned. Now, of course, your giant forward deck does get pinned, but hey, that's a third of the ship that they can't get through. Secondly, this is one of the best armored battleships in the game. It has an incredibly thick armor belt. You have a 356 millimeter main armor belt on your Izumo here. And if you can angle that thing properly, yeah, you're not getting Citadel that much. And keep in mind, too, that's on top of the 127 millimeter Citadel armor, too. So you have in excess of 400, I think almost 500 millimeters of armor that they have to get through in order to Citadel you. Now, it can still be Citadeled, obviously so, but with the angling of the ship properly, you're going to be bouncing a lot of shells. And keep in mind, too, with all 3 guns being in front of the conning tower, that's not really hard to do in the Izumo. Now, of course, that has kind of been, that ability has kind of been negated by the fact that we have, a lot of 20-inch guns now with these super ships and stuff, and a whole lot more of 18-inch guns with quite the bitey shells nowadays. But still, it's still one of the best ships to do that with. Now, she is slow still. That hasn't changed at all. But I mean, that's not really a thing that's really odd for the Japanese battleships by any stretch of the imagination, especially when you start to get to this tier, because, well, you start to get into the more dreadnoughty side of things, and if you can't do a slow, well, I hate to break it to you that the Yami ain't exactly a gazelle either. Now, as far as its dispersion goes, it still does have the Japanese dispersion, as I'm sure you guys are seeing in the background now. But you don't need a ton of shells to hit to really be doing a lot of damage with the Izumo. You just need some shells to hit. Because, again, like we talked about, the AP's been increased, the penetration has been increased. As long as you can land a couple of good shots on most of the battleships, you're going to be doing quite well. Dealing with cruisers is a bit more frustrating in today's game. We have a whole lot of light cruisers that basically don't have any armor, and your AP is going to go right through them. And given the fact that your dispersion isn't that great in the first place, it's still quite frustrating. But when you do run into cruisers that you can pin, like I think there's a Nevsky that I shaved off most of his health at the beginning of this match, because obviously the Nevsky does have actually good side armor, but that good side armor turns into something that can arm my AP when I'm playing the Izumo, and you guys saw what happened there with him. But yes, trying to deal with cruisers is frustrating with the dispersion. So typically with the Izumo, you want to go after the larger ships, the large cruisers, the Agirs, the Alaskas, Yoshinos, Izumas, things like that. And then, work your way through to the battleships. Because, man, the dispersion is definitely good enough to where when you're going up against other battleships, especially these big old ships we have at Tier 9 and Tier 10, you're going to be landing a good chunk of your shells on target if the dispersion doesn't hate you too much. And given the range of the Izumo too, you can take the reload module rather than having to take the range mod, because I mean you have 21 kilometer range, which in my experience even in today's World of Warships is still workable. And even if you don't want to, be stuck with a 21 kilometer range, you can tank the spotting plane. I have the fighter up because this is my very old Izumo build. I probably would be running the spotter today. I just forgot to swap it out when I went to record these matches, but I mean, hey, look, I only had 21 kilometer range and I did fine here. So with taking the reload module, you now have a 26-second reload on these 16-inch guns, and that definitely helps make up for the accuracy. So my recommendation would be, of course, to take the spotter and then, take the reload module, and using the decent detectability that you have now. Now, I'm not trying to say that the ship is stealthy. 13.5 is still, I mean, that's on the better side, I would argue, for a giant battleship. But, yeah, I'm not saying it's got like an 11 kilometer range or anything, or detection range or anything like that. But still, 13.5 is still very workable. And that's how I typically play the ship, and I today don't have much trouble with it. If you look at my stats, that tells a different story, because I was stuck in this for quite some time with an A and B hull version that had terrible AA, and well, yeah, those were dark times to say the least. Now, as far as AA goes, when it's intact, the AA is kind of okay. But, I mean, if you look where the AA guns are located at, they're in places where they're going to get annihilated by HE quite easily out in the open. A lot of single 20 millimeter guns there on the bow, because, why not? But, yeah, those are going to get, those 25 millimeter guns, they all get knocked out after a couple rounds of HE, because Japanese AA is kind of a joke. Historically, as well as in-game as well, they've managed to carry that over quite well. But for a ship that's supposed to be more of a dreadnought style, able to tank a lot of damage and then give it back to other battleships, she still does that very well. And there's an even better version of her called the Baji, which has 2.1 Sigma that came out for the Lunar New Year's event. And if you want an even more accurate Izumo, that's the one everyone tries to get, because Izumo guns with 2.1 Sigma is something quite fearsome. And yeah, that ship is nuts, and I don't have that one yet. I need to try and pick that one up next time it comes around for Lunar New Year's. But yeah, the ship has aged quite well. She got a lot of love around patch 7.7, 8.0, and she is still, in my opinion, one of the better Tier 9 ships. Now, Tier 9, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, is kind of a terrible tier right now, but considering the meta is sit back and snipe, this is a ship that can snipe quite easily. Again, if you really want to, you can take the range mod if you want, but again, I would just use the spotter, and that would, I believe, get you through just fine, considering, again, I've played her for a couple hours trying to get some background footage for y'all, and I was doing fine with 21 kilometer range, and I had plenty of super ship games as well, so yeah, don't worry. I did not get to escape the suffering, if you thought that, because no one can at this stage. But anyway, guys, this is my look back at the Izumo. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Hope you all have a wonderful Tuesday, wonderful rest of your week. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel, and help us get to 50,000 subs. We're getting quite close to that goal. We're almost to 45,000 thanks to you guys. Again, hope you guys have a great week. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.